Hi everyone, thanks very much for joining this week's episode of the Recruitment Reality Podcast. I'm really excited to be talking today to Luke from Trainline. We're going to actually focus specifically on something that Luke is incredibly passionate about, which is candidate experience, which thankfully us over at Willow, we're also incredibly passionate about. So it should be a really good conversation. And I still remember in our sort of preliminary call, Luke, some of the stats you gave me around the cost of a bad candidate experience. And I think these things are only going to be heightened over the next 12 months, where maybe we see a higher availability of talent, etc., and actually the amplified nature of the effect of a bad candidate experience. So I don't want to do as always, I don't want to do a bad job of introducing my guests. So it'd be amazing if you could just give us a quick background to you and I guess like why you're passionate about candidate experience.
Yeah, sure. So, hi, I'm Luke. I'm a talent acquisition manager at Trainline over in London. About 5 odd years working in the recruitment space. I was at a product company before this called Depop, and many years of, or several years of agency recruitment experience before that. Come from like a less traditional recruitment background. I used to be a music photographer back in my heyday. Then again, I guess if you ask anyone in recruitment, I don't think anybody has a traditional entry point into recruitment. Like falling into recruitment seems to be something which people say quite often. But yeah, I think candidate experience is something which is often neglected, or just not really thought about enough, especially if you are one of these companies going through like a quote unquote hypergrowth period. And yeah, I think there's a lot of things people can do to make it right, or at least make it better. So yeah, something which appeals to somebody not just on like a personal size, because of course everyone's been a candidate at one point in their life and has had good candidate experiences, bad candidate experiences. But also if you think about, as you said, about what that can mean from a business perspective as well, and what that can be costing you, it's it appeals to both kind of natures.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things I actually just love about recruitment is everybody's got an opinion on it, because everybody has been through some sort of recruitment process. So it's so universal, and the one thing that every single person has done in or has had an experience of is candidate experience, like whether it's a good one or a bad one. We've both touched on the cost to business. Maybe we should start with that. What was your story again, Luke? It was I think it was about Virgin, right? About the lost subscriptions.
Yeah, so it's quite a well-known case that the then head of talent at Virgin Media put together. I think it was back in 2016. He realized how much money a bad candidate experience was costing them as a business. So Virgin Media, of course, this massive multinational company, they managed to track that through 123,000 rejections, which they had made in a year periods, that 6% of those had then cancelled their subscriptions after the recruitment process. Now, if you think about, on average, let's say a monthly subscription to Virgin is £50, you times that by 12, you're looking at about £4.4 million in business loss, which just down to a poor candidate experiences has then cost them. So if you quantify that to any kind of business context, it's not just like a talent team problem. It's very much like a business problem, not being able to get candidate experience right.
Yeah, it's one of the sort of lesser thought about reputational damage sort of avenues, if you like, where actually people think about a bad product turns up at your door, or it's delivered badly, somebody throws it through the window, or whatever they do in the back of vans, but they don't or somebody misrepresents an organisation or something like that, but nobody really thinks like the main avenue or the most important interaction that people have is trying to find a job, and people don't even think about the brand damage that could come from that. So I totally agree. And then on top of the business cost and the brand reputation stuff, you've also got the opportunity cost where, yes, sure, one person might not be right for you right now, but actually they might be right for you in the future. And if they have a terrible experience, you've got a huge opportunity cost there by not being able to get that person back to you. And I think that's, I don't know, maybe you've got some insight on this, but a lot of companies that we're talking to right now, and over the last 12 months, they've talked about how they're sort of neglecting their database of candidates in their ATS. How much of that do you think is down to like fear of maybe the fact that they've delivered a bad candidate experience, and therefore they're actually afraid to go back to their existing kind of group of applicants?
Yeah, in a perfect world, every candidate, whether they're a hire or whether they're a no hire, you want them to leave the interview process thinking, God, I'm really pissed off that I didn't get the job, but I will definitely apply again when I see something come up. And I think a bad candidate experience then leads to people shunning that idea altogether, and that really negatively affects your employer brand, and it will lead to a Glassdoor page full of very, very scathing reviews, which then, of course, reflects onto future applicants, because things like Glassdoor and other similar platforms seem to be like the first port of call before going into an interview. And
absolutely, if
a negative candidate experience has happened in the past, it's really going to affect how many people are going to be applying in the future. So it's a long-lasting effects, and it's something which, if you get wrong, it's going to take a very long time to dig yourself out of that hole, because of course, like, the digital footprint is everlasting. So I think if you get it wrong, like, it's quite a long-lasting effect.
That's so true. And like the fact that, I mean, Glassdoor reviews are like, if you get a negative one, it is staying there. You can't get rid of it unless they have, targeted a specific individual and stuff like that. So, or if they've falsified information. So if you've given a bad experience and somebody's written about it, somebody will always be able to find that information. So let's sort of switch gears slightly. In terms of advice then, what do you think the biggest challenge that people face with delivering a good candidate experience is? And then how do you kind of advise your team, and how do you as an individual actually combat that challenge?
So I think probably one of the things which people get wrong is probably like the understanding of what candidate experience is and where that timeline starts and finishes. I think from like a high level view, you think is from the first interview through to final interview, and of course that's correct, but you think about what happens before that, what happens after that, is everything from how you project yourselves in your like job site and like the outreach messages you're sending to candidates. That's really when it starts. And then it doesn't really finish until they're onboarded. And I think there's probably even an argument until when like their probation is done, they're still a candidate until they've got a notice period next to them. They're still free agents up until that point. And I think unless you understand every single step of the candidate experience, it's going to be quite difficult to get it right. So you have to be conscious of like everything all the way through to like how your job page reads, and if it's accessible to everybody, all the way through to obviously stuff like onboarding and making sure that the candidate knows what happens after I receive the offer. What does onboarding look like? And I think one of the biggest things which kind of like irks me is that there's this thing, especially when you go in-house, that people want to leave agency recruitment because they think, that they're done with a sales life. And they're like, I don't want to sell anymore. And internal recruitment is going to offer me a place where I don't have to do selling. But I think that's correct to a certain extent. But recruitment forever is sales. If you think about what the candidate is, that's a customer or a client who you're trying to sell your product to, sell your company and the position to. And I think you see so many horror stories just scrolling through LinkedIn, or I mean, I've got an experience of this where people are like ghosted, and you think, when would like a salesperson not follow up or
On a lead.
nurture their prospects? And it's like, yeah, they would always do it. I think just because you're stepping away from a world of commission doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't have like a sales mindset. Um, yeah, literally just that example of Virgin Media. It's sales is going to affect the sales of your company if you get the candidate experience wrong. So I think, I think if you're neglecting that side of things, then I don't know. I fail to see like how somebody's going to get bought into a company if you're not nurturing the same way you would do in an agency world.
Yeah. Well, and I think that kind of comes back to like a base level of actually caring about the process, right? Because the reason salespeople act like that is they obviously want to earn commission and they're driven to, you know, get a lead prospect through the door. I don't think you should go into an internal recruitment role if you're not the kind of person that really cares about candidates. Like, you should, like, I know that I make mistakes all the time in our candidate experience, not through lack of trying or whatever, but I'm super conscious of the fact that if somebody has a bad experience, they are going to tell somebody, and I don't want them to. I want them to leave going, thanks so much, you know, thanks for investing the extra time with the feedback, appreciate you watching the videos, sending I try and, every time I have an interview, when I send feedback, I send a Loom video explaining why that specific individual didn't get the job, what they could have improved, etc. And that's quite hard at a scale, you know, a high scale level, but you should be at least willing to invest the amount of time in a candidate that they've kind of invested in you. So if somebody's uploaded a CV and it's taken 2 minutes, your rejection should take 2 minutes. Do you agree with that? Or you know, and how do you make that scale?
Yeah, like naturally, as you do scale, and you are looking at, you know, like for instance, I've just opened up a senior front end engineer position, and within like a day, I had 50 applicants. And you think, naturally, you can't offer an incredibly bespoke interview process to you can't offer a completely bespoke candidate experience to every single person. Like there's not enough hours in the day to have that kind of one-on-one relationship with people, but there's so much software out there which automates stuff. And you know, like something which I've been working on our ATS is making sure that there are templates there which offer bits of information about the company, such as the time in between maybe I've spoken to them and the next step, which is a hiring manager call, through to a technical interview. That there's a template there which I can send over to people, which has, let's say, an interview which our CTO recently did, a LinkedIn post which offers like which shows you we went on like a big company offsite, and it helps like paint a picture to that person what life at Trainline or what X company is. And through like automation in different software, you can offer them what seems like a very personal one-on-one kind of experience. But, you know, we've got software which can do that by one click. So I don't like, if you can put in the groundwork and make sure you have all of that set up in the beginning, then I don't like the argument that we've got too many candidates to speak to all of them. So I think if you set everything up right, then I think it's not very like relevant argument to make, I don't think.
Yeah. So one of the challenges people have is getting the content to put into those things. So you talk about like a video interview, etc., and, you know, hiring manager overviews of the role. Like, I mean, it's difficult just getting job descriptions out of people a lot of the time. So what's your advice for that? How do you go about kind of crafting these templates and getting stuff that's going to feel personal to the individual, is of high quality, but also isn't laborious for the sort of internal people that you need to get the information from?
So I think firstly, all of it needs to be set up before you kick off a role. Firstly, like I tend not to start recruiting for any position unless I have all of this set up first. You know, whether I've got like an interview plan set in stone and templated on the system, whether I have all of these like email nurture templates set up. I won't start working on a role until all that's there. But I think it's very easy to overcomplicate this kind of thing. And I think if you realize like what's important to them, I think it's especially now when we're going through quite a weird economic climate. You think what kind of information is going to be important to a candidate right now? And you think, okay, they want to jump into a company which is clearly financially stable and is going to see them through like a pending recession. So like our CEO posted out our H1 results not too long ago. So that's something which I've gotten an email template to send out, like, oh, in between now and your next call, I thought it'd be worth sharing with you something our CEO put out, which details how we're doing financially and, our goals on expansion. So I think if you think about what the candidate wants to hear, I think, and, we've all been candidates, and some, thanks to the economic climate, more recent than others. I think it's quite easy to realize what kind of stuff they want to hear.
I mean, it's not massively different to what you want to hear as an employee, is it? You want to hear that the company is stable. You want to make sure that through the recession you're still going to be treated well. It's all the obvious things that people are starting to think about: job security, pay, cost of living, bonuses, etc. How all of those things kind of feed into your daily life. So it shouldn't be too difficult to figure out, I guess. You obviously mentioned technology, Luke. What kind of technology have you used in the past, do you use at the moment, that you really think enhances the candidate experience?
I pretty much rely on our ATS. I think there's a lot of built-in features to ATSs nowadays, which kind of make stuff like the interview process very straightforward. So I pretty much, there's no like secrets to this. I'm not using some bit of tech which most people haven't heard of. I think I just pretty much template it all through ATS. It's pretty straightforward.
Awesome. What's the ATS that you use?
So we use Lever at the moment, cool. Which is I've used Greenhouse in the past. Yeah. I really like I like the data reporting side of things. I'm a big fan of presenting data to the business, and being in like the technology space as well. That's like a language they really speak.
Absolutely.
They love a good dashboard, and Lever has a really good integration with Looker, which is like a BI dashboards. So that's something which Lever does really well. Albeit I see a lot about Ashby at the moment in the news, and it'd be cool to. I've heard people say like the data reporting on Ashby is the best they've ever seen.
Yeah, so I keep hearing about Ashby, but I've no idea about them. I've not had any experience or exposure to them in the past. So maybe something to look into for sure. Maybe just a sort of insight into the world. What's the best and worst candidate experiences that you've seen or indeed experienced? You don't have to name names, but maybe for the good one you can, but for the bad one, it's just more like what was bad about it.
Being a recruiter, it kind of blows your mind when you go through a bad candidate experience, especially if some like candidate experience is something that you're passionate about. You think, how can you get this wrong when you're interviewing for people where this is supposed to be like a quality you're recruiting for? Just before I joined Depop a couple of years ago, I had a company which it was that period where just before I was ready to start actively applying to companies, and I was just reaching out to a few people I knew. I reached out to the CTO of this company, and I said, I know we've worked together before. I'm actually looking for an internal gig. I see you're hiring. I'd love to work for you. And he referred me over to their internal recruitment team. Very quickly had a call with their head of talent. They detailed what the entire process would look like. And this was a company which I was like really, really interested in joining. I really like their product. I come from a background in an agency context of hiring for .NET engineers. That's what the scope of this role would be internally. So I'm really keen for it. And it was one of these tech for good kind of businesses as well. So it ticked a lot of my boxes. And then after detailing the entire process, they went completely quiet. I followed up a few times, heard absolutely nothing back, and I'd already accepted a new role by this point, but I ended up getting an email like 4 weeks
Wow.
later saying, "Oh, you've not been
Thanks
successful."
for letting me know.
I was like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, cheers." So yeah, it's very disappointing when that's something which is so important to you, and it's something which you're going to be asked in an interview as a recruiter, and then they don't, that they don't do it themselves. So that was something which I found quite disappointing, and I don't think that's necessarily like the most the most obtuse kind of example. I'm sure people go through that quite
Yeah,
often,
daily.
which is
Absolutely.
I think in regards to like good examples of candidate experiences, I'd rather than talk about something I've gone through myself, even though I'd say the process of getting into Trainline was pretty good and snappy. I was happy with that. There's something like I wanted to talk about how I feel companies get candidate experience right. And I think especially if you're working for a products company or a company which has like either a physical product or, similar to Trainline, which is a product people can use on their phone. I'm a big fan of when companies embeds like a product experience into the recruitment process. So good example of that is Sonos. So Sonos, when they have people come in to interview in their offices, just before they go into the interview, they sit them down and they say, what's your favorite song? And you say, oh, my favorite song is, I don't know, War Pigs by Black Sabbath. And they sit you down in a room covered or surrounded by Sonos speakers, and they play your favorite song on their top of the line best products. You can really experience what it is that you're working towards. So you go into your final interview knowing what the company does, and you've experienced it, and it makes you really excited. So that's one
Yeah, I love
example.
that.
And then
Good choice of song as well, by the way.
it's quite an interesting one. I've got it on my alarm, so it's what wakes me up in the morning.
Wow.
um
That's a
yeah,
powerful
and
way to
then
wake up, Luke, I'll be honest.
yeah. And Uber as well. So like when Uber have like a final interview and you go into their offices, um, you can get there on a Uber ride expensed by them. So you've experienced their
Yeah.
products going into an interview. So I think those are like really powerful examples of how you can get that part of the experience right,
Absolutely.
and people are like immediately more bought in. So yeah, I think those are some good ways of like getting
I
it
really
right.
like those examples. It's really easy for a recruitment technology business to implement that. Obviously, every candidate we ever employ has to do a Willow, so and they either understand and love it, or they realise that actually it's not the company for them, which is quite interesting. So yeah, and I think that it's a great way to immerse somebody, especially with like a premium product like Sonos.
I guess, yeah, rather they figure out at that point than a couple of weeks
Absolutely.
into the job they realise it's something they're
Yeah,
keen for.
absolutely. Like if you're sat down going, "Why are they playing my favourite song? This is so weird." You're like, probably not the place for you, to be honest, if you're not that passionate about sound. So there you go. So look, to wrap up, Luke, it's been really interesting. Some useful stuff in there for sure. If you were to give there's been lots of advice already about basically keeping in contact with your candidates. I totally agree with the treat them as if they're a prospect and you're in sales, and they are precious commodities. As long as you're polite when you're persistent, they'll have a better experience and they'll appreciate it. I really love that immersive idea of getting your whatever product or whatever mission you have in front of those people during the process as well. What, if any, advice have you got left? Like, what would if you were going into a brand new team and you were saying, right, this is the number one thing that we have to focus on for candidate experience to be a success, what would it be?
Number one, treat people like you want to be treated yourself. I think that's a rule to live by in recruitment or any other
Yeah.
situation. But I think set metrics as well. So think about how long candidates sit in every. I think every recruitment company is proud of their time to hire or wants their time to hire to be better, but like really break that down. how long are they staying at every step of the
Yeah.
process? You know, how long are they at CV reveal for? Um, like try to quantify that and make that, let's say 48 or 24 hours between people hearing back, and make sure they always do hear back. Don't reject people without giving them a reason. I'm not saying, again, talking about recruiting at scale, that it's feasible to give them like a bespoke reason every time, but at least give them some kind of signal that they haven't got the job, rather than keep them in limbo for extended periods of
Yeah.
time. Yeah, just understand every step of the candidate experience, where it starts, where it ends. If it starts at like outreach messages, then think about how we as a business going to market. You know, do we have like, you know, are we showing off our values in the right way? You know, are we painting a detailed enough picture at the starting blocks to people that they want to actually start working for us? And I don't know. I think more importantly, treat people how you want to be
Yeah.
treated. Think about stuff which bad candidate experiences, and think, are we doing this? And if you are, I don't know,
Don't.
listen to this
Yeah,
podcast.
don't do
Yeah,
it.
yeah, listen to this podcast and then don't do
Yeah,
it.
I
Yeah.
think it's such an easy and obvious bit of advice that people just don't do. Like, when you become a recruiter, quite often you forget that you have been recruited, and one day you'll be recruited in the future. So actually, if you just think like, what did I like and dislike, and what example do I want to set to my candidates, that's going to show them that I actually care and I really am thinking about them as individuals, because I'm thinking about the way that I'd want to be treated if I was in their shoes. Like, it's so obvious, but I think people just get rushed off their feet and forget that.
Mm,
So it's a great bit of advice to just take stock of like, what's important to you as an employee at the moment. That was a good point. You know, what do
mm.
candidates actually want to hear about right now, and then how do you build those bits of information into your process? So really interesting chat, Luke. I really appreciate your time and your passion for candidate experience. I think somebody, I see all these things on LinkedIn, you know, talking about all sorts of different stuff. I would love like a Carl Pilkington-esque GIF where you could just go around and call BS on people that say that they've got an amazing candidate experience when really they're a bit lazy in different places. Like, I
Yeah.
could just see me doing that, but I could see people doing it to me as well. Because hands up, I think everybody does fall down at one hurdle at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, talking about hiring at scale, it's, you know, it's very easy for stuff to fall between the cracks, and we are human. You know,
Yeah,
some applications do get forgotten about. It's something which is hard to deny,
yeah,
but
absolutely.
you're making a conscious effort, then hopefully that number's not as high
Yeah, as the positive.
as
I think
places.
one of just being candid, one of my biggest challenges is sometimes the candidate's just not right, but I really like them. I really, really like them. So
Mm,
then I hold off telling them that they're just not right, because I'm not sure how to deliver that news. Um,
mm,
because it's not an actionable bit of feedback. So your point again, just don't leave them in limbo. That's the worst thing you could do. It's better to give difficult news that's maybe a bit ambiguous about the reasons, than it is to give no news whatsoever. Because people just
yeah,
hold on and hold on and hold on and wait.
yeah. I know we're maybe running short on time, but I'll give an example of once when I was recruiting for an engineer position, and we ended up having like quite a few engineering roles open, and then like out of nowhere, one of them got filled internally, and then we had an offer be accepted out of the blue, and we went from having several vacancies to almost like none. And there was a candidate who had literally just finished his interview, and the signal was we should hire them, but there wasn't unfortunately anything for them at that
Mm.
time. Um, and of course, that can be quite a horrible feeling when you put in like several hours worth of speaking to me, which is a chore in itself, but also technical interviews and just generally emotional effort just to be told there's no role for you. But because the candidate experience had been so positive, and I was staying in contact with them all the time, and even offered to take them for a beer just to say sorry about the whole situation, and just generally got everything right along that like 3 weeks that he had been in the process, we ended up having a role pop up like 2 weeks later, and he was still so bought into the company that we ended up like hiring him, and he was still keen, because I've been conscious of every step of the process and making sure that they're still bought into the company, even if it's a negative experience. And if somebody can turn around and say, yeah, I still want to work for this company, even though it wasn't for me on this occasion, you know you're getting it right.
Yeah.
But if you walk away saying, no, I'm never working for that company, then I think you need to look yourself in the mirror and say,
what are you doing wrong? Yeah, absolutely. Totally understand and agree. And sometimes these things take longer than they should. But then it's just about that consistent clarity, honesty about what's going on in the process, so your candidate actually knows. Cool. Well, look, Luke, thank you so much for your time. It's been great to chat. If people want to get in contact and want to find out about jobs at Trainline, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Like every recruit in the world, I'm glued to LinkedIn. Something you never expect before going into recruitment. I didn't even have a license, and now I'm on it more than any other app. So Luke Mellor on LinkedIn, same email format. If you want to apply for a role at Trainline, we are hiring. Lots of exciting stuff going on in the UK, Europe. So if you want to talk about tech, then please reach out.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And people, don't forget to subscribe and like it. It honestly does help. So thanks everybody. Have a good week. Luke, enjoy the rest of your week, mate.
Cheers.